Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Mr. Anonymous, and here's what he has to say. Hi Sandman, a few days ago I was listening to a TEDx talk by Dr. Warren Farrell. The talk was generally about the boy crisis, but he delved into one topic I rarely hear covered, which is over-policing in the prison industrial complex. Dr. Warren Farrell highlights this. Although we hear Black Lives Matter, we never hear Boys Lives Matter, although 9 out of 10 incarcerated are male. Year after year, it grows increasingly more illegal to be a man as the government passes new laws designed to control our behaviors. Whether the vice is sex, drugs, theft, or violence, incarceration has skyrocketed across the board, and if you look at incarceration on a timeline, you'll find that it falls almost exactly in line with the rise of feminism in the early 1980s. What are your thoughts on over-policing and how do men protect themselves as feminism gains a stronger foothold in the criminal justice system? Thanks always. Well, Mr. Anonymous, thanks for your donation as well as your topic request. I put the links that you sent me in the description and we'll cover them in a few minutes. But first, there really isn't much we can do about the over-policing and over-incarceration epidemic of men. Women have legitimate ways to steal money, including alimony, divorce, micro-divorce, and dating in general. Her theft from a man is socially acceptable and even encouraged by many people in her social circles. Women are treated like male white-collar criminals by the justice system when they commit genuine criminal offenses. However, men are punished far more harshly for the same offenses and often have to spend 3 times as much time in prison on average for the same crime as a woman. If you're a man and you're going to become a criminal, then you need to understand the difference between the civil courts and the criminal courts. For example, let's use the relatively recent case of Bering and him losing his YouTube channel for violating copyright and using the likeness of a cute and cuddly bear to attract people to that channel. The monetary value of the financial offenses he committed were probably in the neighborhood of roughly $10,000 to $20,000. If you stole $10,000 to $20,000 from your employer and you were caught, you'd be fined with the felony and you'd probably serve some time and you'd have a record, and it would be more difficult for you to get a job in the future when you came out of prison. But if you violate trademark or copyright law, your fines are a lot less, and usually the company you stole from will just send you a cease and desist notice and ask you to account for how much money you stole from them. If it's a small sum of money, they probably won't even pursue it in court. I remember when I first built my first internet business, I learned everything I could from a 17-year-old kid that was generating roughly $50,000 to $60,000 a month by violating copyright law. In the end, he was sued by Corbis, a company owned by Microsoft, for stealing pictures of celebrities, then repackaging them and then making a killing. After being sued, he still had a paid-off apartment, car, and about $60,000 to $70,000, and he was only 21 years of age. If he had been a conventional criminal and had got caught and went to court, they would have taken all the proceeds of his crimes and he would have gone to prison. But because his crime was copyright, he got to keep most of what he earned and got what amounted to a slap on the wrist. He retooled his business by purchasing the rights to celebrity pictures, and he continued on his merry way. If a man is smart, he can violate the law in strategic ways, keep the money that he steals, and continue to do what he's always done. The only issue with being a copyright or trademark pirate is that it always catches up to you. I used to repackage corporate copyrighted materials many years ago and made money doing it, but eventually I got a cease and desist notice and had to change my ways. So if you're going to be a criminal and break the law, do it at something that takes you to civil courts as opposed to criminal ones. Now, with regards to Dr. Warren Farrell and the video you sent me, Mr. Anonymous, he says that our survival as a society usually depends on the death or incarceration of young males, and we accept this. The less educated boys and men are, that means they're more likely to be criminals. They also tend to have less empathy because they were often raised by single moms and more likely to be in prison. The rise of the prison population is a rise in single-parent households headed by women. Instead, we should be putting single mothers in prison that divorce their husbands for no good reason. Better yet, they should take the prison or incarceration bills and send it to the mothers who created these sons. Warren Farrell also makes some valid points like, when boys hurt, they hurt us, and that boys do better with male teachers. I know that in my life I was unable to learn anything and my grades were hopeless with female teachers. But the rise in prison populations in the United States is probably a conspiracy. The prison industrial complex makes a lot of money for private prison corporations that run those prisons. They don't want less inmates, they want more of them so they can profit off the cheap labor and so they can siphon off money from government taxes. I read somewhere that many things are manufactured in prisons and the prisoners are paid slave wages so they can buy toilet paper and cigarettes. Things like books for the blind, lingerie, including Victoria's Secret, picnic tables, military uniforms and jackets, IKEA products back in the 1970s and 80s, as well as baseball caps, canoes, Blue jeans are all made by prisoners. So it really is an industrial complex. First you destroy the males in their youth and then they lash out and commit criminal offenses. The lawyers make their money and then the prison system makes the money by selling slave labor. What could possibly go wrong? We better pray that there's never a financial collapse in the United States where the prisoners are let out of jail because the state can no longer afford to keep them in such prisons. We would see up to 2 million criminals on the streets in the United States instantly. It would be like that film Demolition Man, except you wouldn't have an army of Sylvester Stallones to keep the peace. You'd probably need an army of Judge Dredds, and Stallone is probably way too old for that. The second link you sent me, Mr. Anonymous, is about the over-policing and the militarization of police departments in the United States. The idea is to dress up ordinary police officers in SWAT team uniforms and have them go around cracking skulls for mostly petty theft. I believe the idea is that if you're thinking of becoming a criminal and then you see police walking around like the military, it will be somewhat of a deterrent. The article mentions that what would be normal childhood behavior like doodling on a dress or farting in the classroom now warrants the use of excessive force where the cop at your school comes in and takes you away in handcuffs. At this point, everyone is wondering why I made the title of this video, Put Her in Prison. Well, recently in one of my MGTOW mystery links, I put a woman warden discussing female inmates. She says that female prisoners are a lot harder to deal with than the male ones. Women obviously don't go to prison and jail as much because the judges go easy on them and because they tend not to rock the boat when it comes to social issues. They stay out of prison firstly because they steal from men, and secondly because they don't want to be embarrassed, so they avoid doing criminal activities so they won't risk being ostracized from the community. It's easy to understand why society is punishing men disproportionately for criminal activities, because men tend to be the majority of criminals. Recently in his video titled The MGTOW Migrant Crisis, Marcus from the Groundwork of Metaphysics of MGTOW made mention of Nietzsche saying that punishment was a way for people to inflict cruelty on people as a form of revenge. So why is Western society, and most specifically the United States, choosing to inflict punishment on men in a cruel way by enslaving 2 million men to make blue jeans? Why are white-collar crime and ordinary crime treated so differently? I would argue that it has a lot to do with racism. If a white man chooses to become a white-collar criminal violating patent law with his company, he won't be punished to the same extent as a poor black man that sells crack on the streets. Sure, there might be some black men out there that are white-collar criminals and thieves, but the odds of that are rather limited. So it's not only a divide between civil and criminal law, but it's also about race as well as sex. A white woman committing a white-collar crime in civil court will most likely be forced to pay even less money than the white male pulling off the same caper. A black man committing copyright violations, for example, wouldn't be going to jail, but I would be interested to see if the judge orders him to pay more money to the company that he stole the money from. As for the criminal courts, which is what I thought this video was going to be mostly about, a black man gets roughly 10% more time in prison when compared to a white man. But a woman only gets 30% of the sentence that a black man gets. So it's not so much about race, but more about gender. Society chooses to be cruel to men because perhaps it is done as a deterrent, but it doesn't rehabilitate people, it creates career criminals. To quote Johnny Depp in the film Blow, and I apologize if this quote isn't exact, but when his character is sent to prison, he says that he entered the big house with a bachelor of marijuana, and he came out with the masters of cocaine. Prisons are like incubators for added criminal activity. I would argue that this isn't so much a war on men in the United States by shoving them into prisons, but more of a race by the prison companies to grow their profits by incarcerating increasing numbers of prisoners into their jails. This is just cruelty masquerading as justice. If a man steals $100,000 from a safe, he's going to prison for 20 years. And another man steals $200,000 by printing t-shirts with a band logo on them, and he pays a $50,000 fine and gets to keep the rest of the money. They both might have put the same amount of effort into their crimes, but they're treated completely differently. So when people in the men's rights movement tell you about the sentencing gap between men and women, you need to ask them about the sentencing gap between civil and criminal crimes. Many men make a lot of money violating civil law. For example, you get people like that in the MGTOW community. Take, for example, some people are using images that they don't have rights to, and they don't pay for them. This type of business is usually built on a house of cards. If the stock photo companies ever find out how much money these guys are making after taking images from them, then it's quite possible that they'll go after them for the 3 strikes with regards to copyright law and shut down their channels entirely. I've also warned MGTOW 101 to use the fair use label appropriately because many of his videos don't actually criticize what's on the screen except using a buzzer or pictures that are also copyrighted. If Fox decides suddenly to file 3 copyright strikes at him at the same time, His channel could be toast if YouTube doesn't think that he's using fair use properly. Remember that 17-year-old kid that got sued by Corbis? Once Corbis smelled money, they basically went after him. The same could easily happen to MGTOW content producers. They won't be going to jail, but their channels could easily get shut down. There are also many React videos on YouTube making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but when the videos are found, the copyright owners usually shut them down or start collecting revenue from them, but the React channel gets to keep the revenue they made until they were caught. How long until YouTube says that's not allowed either? I sleep well at night knowing that as a man I'm not committing copyright or trademark violations on my channel. I won't wake up and see everything evaporate. But men that sell drugs can get caught at any time and lose 20 years of their lives and go to prison. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again, Mr. Anonymous, for your donation, as well as your topic request. Also, don't forget the MGTOW mystery link and like this video. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps the furry handcuffs away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.